Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Monsoon is still some distance away in the north. I know that it's there on the west coast, but political winds have picked up and there are lots of straws there. So a lot is happening, and I know that today's headlines, yesterday's headlines, maybe even tomorrow's headlines are about Jiten Prasada leaving Congress party, going to the BJP, and also Mukul Roy coming back to Mamata Banerjee. After having left Mamata Banerjee for BJP, he's now come back. So that's a ghar wapsi of sorts. But let's step behind these, because these are important straws in the wind. But the important stuff that's happening is happening with the BJP. And I say BJP, what's happening with the BJP is more important because it is the most important political party in the country. That party has now reached the halfway mark or nearly the halfway mark of its current term in parliament, but more importantly, some of its most important state governments are coming up for elections over the next couple of years, and in some of those it senses a little trouble. That's why what is more important than visuals of Mukul Roy coming back to Mamata Banerjee saying that he's come back, he was never a traitor, or Jiten Prasada going to the BJP, somebody in the Congress party saying that it's a slap on our face. I think Harish Rawat, the former Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, said it. But someone else saying that he showed no ideological commitment. Then we also saw Jiten Prasada, I think in an interview with the Express, ask a rhetorical question that those who question my ideological commitment should explain why the Congress party aligned with Shiv Sena, or Congress party had this cleric, Furfura cleric in West Bengal elections as its partner. So that stuff is going on. The big thing, however, the more important visuals, you've seen them, some, not all, the more important visuals and headlines, or headlines lower down currently, should have been one, Yogi Adityanath coming in, calling in on Amit Shah first, then calling in on the Prime Minister, having a 1-hour meeting with the Prime Minister. What's he doing here? So far, he's the one BJP Chief Minister who's built a big profile of his own. Looks like he sees himself as the third most important leader in the BJP, if not the second, ahead of Amit Shah. But he came in a manner in which chief ministers, usually ordinary chief ministers, were summoned in the past. So looked a bit like that. The defense may be that this is on the eve of his cabinet reshuffle, but this is uncharacteristic, and we've seen things happening in UP around the same time. The inclusion of Jiten Prasada, who is a sizable Brahmin presence. Mind you, I didn't say Brahmin leader. He is not somebody who can win big elections by himself, but Uttar Pradesh has 10% Brahmin vote, right? It's a lot of vote. In fact, in terms of caste groups, this is only the next after the Yadavs. Yadavs are about 13-14%. And because upper caste Hindus have generally shifted to the BJP, BJP gets most of this vote, but there have been some murmurs of disaffection among the Brahmins. In fact, more than some murmurs, that although BJP has a bunch of Brahmin leaders, including the Deputy Chief Minister, but somehow they have no power. All the power is with Yogi Adityanath, who is a Thakur. And that's why you've seen these grievances building up, and which is the reason why Jiten Prasada had launched his Brahmin Chetna Manch. So he was going around the state from place to place, particularly meeting families, Brahmin families, who had a sense of grievance. Somebody was killed in an encounter, somebody was arrested, things like that. So the impression was that just as in the past it was said that Mulayam Singh Yadav's and Akhilesh Yadav's police and law and order machinery targeted those who were adversaries of the Yadavs but protected the Yadavs, some of the same stuff is happening in Uttar Pradesh right now, with the government becoming too pro-Thakur. Right or wrong, that's the story that's been built up. Now, Jiten Prasada, who's articulate and who's been working on the ground all this while, his entry in the BJP is also a message to Yogi Adityanath, as also first the induction, and now what it looks like the elevation, at least in the power structure, of A.K. Sharma, who's a former bureaucrat, a trusted former bureaucrat of the Prime Minister's own team. He left the Prime Minister's office, he was sent to Uttar Pradesh, made an MLC, member of Legislative Council. It was widely expected he'll become a minister. it was also evident that Yogi Adityanath did not like him very much. He was then sent to Varanasi to look after the Prime Minister's constituency area during the pandemic, did a reasonably good job. In fact, that was one part of the UP model that was talked about, Varanasi model, and he is now back in Lucknow and looks like he will also be playing some sort of a role or a bigger role in Uttar Pradesh. And so it is in this context that Yogi Adityanath came to Delhi for these meetings. Then see what else is happening. This is not a stray event. I told you straws in the wind. There's a whole bunch of straws in this political wind. Bhupendra Yadav, BJP's very powerful organizational leader, he is right now in Gujarat to meet some ministers and party leaders who've been disaffected with the Chief Minister Vijay Rupani. Kailash Vijay Vargiya, the leader in Madhya Pradesh, who was till recently managing the campaign in West Bengal, Kailash Vijay Vargiya and Narottam Mishra, also Madhya Pradesh leader, they are meeting a bunch of people in their own party in Bhopal, essentially dissidents who are impatient with Shivraj Singh Chauhan. Once again, they don't want that impatience to grow because Madhya Pradesh is a government that they sort of took by manipulation through defections last year. So it took a lot of work doing that. They don't want this government weaker. The fact, however, is that this Shivraj Singh Chauhan is much weaker than Shivraj Singh Chauhan of the past. So he is now a multiple term chief minister, but in this term he is the weakest yet. That's one. Then you have BL Santosh, again the party's very powerful organizational leader. He is in Goa right now. He is meeting some ministers who have been dissidents, who made critical comments about the chief minister. He is meeting the chief minister as well. So it does look like there's quite a bit of firefighting going on. So what is the picture behind all this? Because when we cut political clutter, we try and see what lies behind all this. Is it just dissidents? Is it to quell dissidents? Or is the BJP now also figuring out its course in the future? I would go with the second one, because what happens? It isn't a question of losing Uttar Pradesh or not losing Uttar Pradesh. BJP is desperate to win Uttar Pradesh with its own majority. Not winning it by majority causes a problem, resolves a problem, and I will tell you what it is. Winning it by majority, and that to a healthy majority, resolves a problem but compounds a problem. So here is how it works. If BJP wins with a decent majority yet again, it can be seen as Yogi Adityanath winning a second term in Uttar Pradesh. He will be the rarest of rare chief ministers in Uttar Pradesh to win a successive second term. That happens, he will then rise in the power structure of the BJP in a way that will make many central leaders uncomfortable, because he is more saffron than anybody else and he can challenge anybody else if all that the BJP is going to ride is the Hindu vote in the Hindi heartland. Then he will become a formidable leader. Then it won't be so easy to keep summoning him to Delhi like this and to tell him what to do with his cabinet, etc., because he has a mind of his own, and remember, he is very young. He is younger than Rahul Gandhi. He is about the age of Arvind Kejriwal. In fact, just a couple of weeks back or maybe a week back was his 49th birthday. So very important. On the other hand, if BJP comes to power but it's short of a majority and then has to get others, that is a perfectly good reason to change the chief minister, because in any case, once you need allies, they may not accept Yogi Adityanath as chief minister. So the problem, the first one resolves is, the problem it resolves is that you are then leading to 2024 with UP under your belt, safe, and your numbers in Rajya Sabha do not get affected that much. At this point, BJP has 300 plus members in the state assembly, because they also got a bunch of defectors. So it's gone higher than the 312 they had won in the election. Second, the problem it causes is it produces one more tall leader under the BJP that since the rise of Narendra Modi has not happened with the BJP. In fact, if you look at the BJP cabinet in Delhi also, there are no more tall leaders left, and the tall leaders who are there, even leaders of the past, three of them are former party presidents. One of them is, yes, tall in his own right, that's Amit Shah, but the other two, that is Rajnath Singh and Nitin Gadkari do not have the same profile in the political structure. So Yogi Adityanath will become one of those. So that's the problem. The advantage will be the comfort level going to 2024. If they are short of a majority, the advantage is they can then bury the hatchet in Yogi Adityanath's back. But at the same time, it creates a bigger problem, which is that going into 2024, BJP is a bit weaker. It does not have the same wind in its sails. Also, its opposition, which essentially will be Akhilesh Yadav at this point, the opposition will take heart, and also many likely contributors will start buying the opposition parties' electoral bonds as well. So that is the reason, as I understand this situation, BJP High Command will not like to disturb Yogi Adityanath. I don't see a change of leadership, although there is a lot of speculation, but they will try to rein him in. Now be seen like they are advising him or they are supervising his cabinet reshuffle, maybe bring in some people to balance him. So certainly a balancing, a reining in act is on, and that's why it's been made so visible. So that's the big development in Uttar Pradesh that's going on, and this is work in progress, makes no doubts about it. Gujarat and Karnataka. Now in Karnataka, again BJP has a concern, because as I had written in National Interest some time back, I'll share that article with you, B.S. Yediyurappa so far is the only BJP chief minister who can defy the high command. I said Yogi Adityanath has risen in stature, but he is not defying the high command. He is not in that position. But Yediyurappa can defy the high command, because without his Lingayat vote bank, BJP cannot win Karnataka. And the last time they tried to sideline him, he went away. He took bulk of his Lingayat vote away, and the BJP lost power. That's when Siddaramaiah came in. BJP lost power in Karnataka. BJP cannot take that chance. They cannot mess with him beyond a point. They can write the odd tweet or issue the odd statement or get someone to irritate him a bit. But he is also an old Ghag player, thick-skinned. He can deal with these things. So as long as he is there in this term, if the BJP disturbs him, then they will lose a state like Karnataka, which they can't afford to, and I'll tell you why. Losing any state right now will be terrible for the BJP. It always is, but this, right now in particular. So again, it seems to be the advice to the BJP High Command is that don't mess with him right now. Maybe when court cases against him, corruption cases against him, gather their own momentum, that will give you an excuse to get rid of him or put him in his place, because he's grown too big for his chappals. But right now they cannot push him beyond that. Vijay Rupani in Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh Shivraj Chauhan, those two are looking at, I think those two are looking at an end of tenure situation, because it's quite evident now that in both cases BJP will go to elections in 2023. There is still some time left with new leaders. So once again, for that some preparations are going on, and it's important for the BJP to keep dissidents in control. Otherwise, it will begin to look like the Congress party. Look, BJP has become like the Congress party in one particular sense, and that particular sense is that Congress party had a high command culture. Everything was decided by the high command. It started with high command deciding on chief ministers, high command deciding on ministers, high command deciding on the portfolios of ministers, high command then also clearing appointments of chief secretary, DGP, etc., etc., etc. Then high command deciding who will get the Rajya Sabha nominations from your state. All that had gone on with the Congress party, but not with the BJP to this extent. If you're a big follower of, or big loyalist or fan of Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, you can say BJP has gone forward in these 7 years by developing a high command like Congress used to have, but it was all powerful across the country. And look at this situation, Congress party is not learning, they are not all powerful anymore, but they've got the high command. All they've got is the high command, Rasi jal gayi, bal nahi gaya. But if you are an old-fashioned BJP person, then you would say that my party had some semblance of democracy within. Right now, I am acquiring the Congress party's high command culture. So is it good for me? We have moved backward. So you could decide, depending on where you are vis-a-vis Narendra Modi and Amit Shah and their style of politics, you could decide, I'm not deciding it, you could decide whether you see this as a move forward or move backwards. Whereas the fact is that now this is a high command controlled party, and this high command right now has many other thoughts in its mind. So many people have left other parties to join it. There is Jyotiraditya Scindia most of all. Jiten Prasada has come in just now, but there is also Jay Panda who came in Odisha, and there are many others. So what does it do with them? They've got them waiting for too long. Jyotiraditya Scindia delivered the Madhya Pradesh government to the BJP on a thali, just like that, on a platter. But he was given Rajya Sabha, but now it's been more than a year and he's sitting outside cooling his heels. Jay Panda, he contested elections, he lost, he's cooling his heels. So BJP also has to see what to do with people who've come in, because it will also now review this situation a little bit in terms of people who come in without ideological quote unquote purity or ideological commitment. Say Mukul Rai, for example, he's a good example. So in that situation, BJP will have to review this entire situation. And I promised you that I will tell you why losing another state now in the next say 12 months will be so rough on the BJP. Because is this the peak of the BJP? Is this the peak of the Modi Shah BJP? If you are a fan, you might say yes, this is definitely the peak of the Modi Shah BJP. But I will give you a piece of statistics. The peak, and I will first give you a proposition. The proposition is the peak of the Modi Shah BJP was in 2017, sometime in 2017, when they controlled, besides the central government, they controlled or they ruled either directly or in coalitions enough states in India to rule over territories that contained 71% of India's population. 71%. At this point, they are down to 49%. How did that happen? Because after they had won UP, it looked like if you painted the map of India in political colors, most of the map was saffron. What has happened since then is that they've lost some big states. They lost Rajasthan, they lost Chhattisgarh, then they lost Maharashtra, the big loss. They lost Tamil Nadu, which was their ally earlier, now they are adversaries there. They lost Jharkhand. So if you see the loss of all these and gain of a couple, they gained Karnataka, for example, and also Madhya Pradesh after having lost it. So Madhya Pradesh went back, but in spite of that, in spite of these two sort of governments that they sort of conjured up through defections in Madhya Pradesh and Karnataka, even today they control only states in India that account for 49% of the population. So this is not the BJP at its peak. If it loses one or more state, then this begins to slide, and then several consequences follow. One, opposition has rising leaders, opposition has rising hopes. Also, opposition begins to get more contributions because the people with money love to hedge their bets. Nobody wants to take chances completely. So if that happens, particularly now when so many center state issues are coming up in areas from health to GST to agriculture, you will find more of this pushback starting for more and more states. It's been unusual, but this time, particularly on the issue of vaccines, even Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy and Naveen Patnaik also spoke out a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. So the point to underline is that the politics of India ultimately will also be played in the states. You can't just win Delhi once for 5 years and say everything is done. Politics will continue on in states, and right now it's in full swing. In about 6 months from now, when the UP election campaign has begun, you will see the peak of it.